The wind cut low across the canyon like a blade, lifting sand from the cracked earth and sending it tumbling between the skeletons of broken fences. Perdition Creek barely stirred in the dawn, just a few shuttered windows and the cry of a lone hawk circling above the rocky ledge. The old barn on the edge of town hadn't seen use in years. Its slats were gray, half-collapsed. The roof, like a drunkard's, had sagging too far left. Inside, a sound like scratching. Then chewing. Slow, desperate chewing. She was curled in a nest of hay that had long since lost its color. Just a knot of ribs and elbows, barefoot and mud-caked. Her wild brown hair sticking to her hollow cheeks. Her fingers clutched at a straw bundle like it was meat. Her jaw moved with stubborn rhythm, teeth grinding against the useless fibers. That was how Colt Wheeler found her, silent, chewing dry hay like a starving animal. He'd ridden out before sunup, the way he did every morning, though no one much knew why. Maybe to stretch the leg that never healed right. Maybe because sleep had stopped meaning anything to him. His horse, Jasper, snorted as they passed the old barn. Something about the place gave the gelding pause. Colt pulled up and listened. Then he saw her. He didn't reach for his gun, though he could have. He didn't shout, though he should have. He just dismounted with a grunt, stepped through the crooked doorframe, and stood watching her as the light crept in behind him. "Girl," he said after a long moment, voice like worn leather. "You deserve a table, not scraps." She didn't answer, just froze. Then slowly, her jaw stopped moving, and she looked up at him with the hollow, hunted stare of something half-feral. Her eyes were enormous, too big for her face. They looked older than they had any right to. Colt knelt, slow and careful like she was a spook mare. He took off his hat, set it beside him. "You hungry?" he asked. She didn't speak, but he saw the truth of it in her bones. He didn't say another word, just offered his hand. Later, back at the ranch, she sat on the back stoop in the morning light, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket. Her feet were blistered. Her arms were scratched raw. She hadn't said anything the whole ride. Still hadn't. Just ate whatever he gave her. Half a biscuit, a boiled egg, warm milk, like someone might snatch it from her if she looked away. She gave her name after 2 days. Mara. Nothing else. No last name. No town. Just Mara. Colt didn't ask for more. He gave her the loft above the tack room, where it stayed warm even on cold nights. It wasn't much, but it had a roof, a bedroll, and an old patchwork quilt his wife had made a lifetime ago. He didn't go up there, just left food at the ladder and kept to his chores. Still, he noticed things, like how she flinched when the wind blew hard through the cracks in the barn wall, like how she always kept her back to the wall when she sat, like how she never took off the long shirt he gave her, even to sleep. One night he saw the scars, just a glimpse when she reached too far lifting a pail. Raised white welts across her shoulder blades, as though someone had carved their anger into her with something cruel and sharp. He didn't mention it. Down in Perdition Creek, talk had started to slither between saloon doors and general store aisles. A gang had been spotted along the canyon pass. Not just any gang. The Blackthorn Riders. They burned up a ranch outside Dagger Ridge. The blacksmith murmured to the barber, took the cattle and the girl, left the rest to crows. Cole heard it. Everyone did. Most folks just locked their doors tighter and prayed to be spared. Cole didn't pray. He rode home slower that night, a tightness behind his ribs. The name Blackthorn made his hands itch. He didn't tell Mara. Instead, he brought home an extra loaf of bread, a wedge of salted cheese, and an old wooden comb. She didn't thank him, but she used the comb. He saw her hair the next morning, less tangled, still wild but brushed at least, like someone trying to remember they were a person. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the ridgeline and turned the sky to blood and gold. Mara sat cross-legged on the porch steps, her blanket around her shoulders and a piece of cornbread cradled in her hands like something sacred. She ate it slow, savoring each bite. Behind her, Colt stood in the shadow of the doorway, arms crossed, gaze distant. She didn't see him watching. He didn't move. Somewhere inside him, a memory stirred, too sharp to touch. He turned before the tears could come, and the old wood creaked under his boot as he stepped away. The wind carried the smell of sage and old blood across the plains that summer. Long days stretched quiet over the Wheeler ranch, but silence had a weight to it, a kind of hum just beneath the surface. Colt Wheeler had learned to live with it, same way he'd learned to live without the badge, and without the people who used to call his name when supper was ready. He hadn't always been a cattleman. Once, he was a lawman with a reputation from Copper Bend to Devil's Gate. Folks used to say he rode faster than thunder and shot straighter than a preacher's stare. But the day his wife and son were taken, burned alive in their own home during a Blackthorn raid, Colt hung up his star and buried it with the only two people that ever meant anything. Since then, he'd spoken little, drank only on the coldest nights, and ran a modest spread of lean cattle. Just him, the land, and whatever memories didn't hurt too much to carry. And now a girl. Mar wasn't like anyone he'd known. She never asked questions, never begged for stories. She worked hard from sunup to sundown, cleaned stalls without being told, learned to lead the horses with a firm grip and a soft voice. In time, she rode better than most men Colt had seen drift through town, light and quiet in the saddle, eyes always watching the horizon. She still didn't talk much, but her silence had changed. It wasn't desperate anymore, just careful. One crisp morning, Colt handed her a worn leather pouch. She opened it slowly to find a small .22 revolver nestled inside. "You'll practice behind the haystack," he said. "No one'll hear." She looked at him sideways. "You think I can't already?" He paused, then grinned. "Think I'd better see for myself." She hit every bottle he lined up on the fence post, steady as stone. He didn't say a word, just nodded. Maybe it wasn't about teaching her after all. Maybe it was about giving her permission to be dangerous. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Grayson rode up to the ranch, dust trailing behind him like a bad omen. "Colt," he called out, reining in his sorrel gelding by the porch. "Got a minute?" Colt came out wiping his hands on a rag, face unreadable. "Word from the stage stop," Grayson said, swinging one leg down. Blackthorns were seen camped at Dead Man's Ridge. Burned another outpost up near Rock Hill. Colt's jaw tightened. Casualties. A girl. 14 maybe. Taken. Same as before. They stood in silence. The only sound was the creak of saddle leather and the distant moo of cattle. "You still got that girl?" Grayson asked, jerking his chin toward the barn. "She's mine," Colt said flatly. "Came here hungry. Been working the ranch." Grayson squinted. "Ain't my business unless someone says otherwise." "No one will." Grayson nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Just keep your eyes open, Colt. We both know what them boys are capable of." Colt said nothing, just watched him ride off, jaw clenched. Later that afternoon, while Mara was brushing down the mare, Old Man Jessup came down the road in his rickety wagon. He pulled up, called out a greeting, and handed over a bushel of apples in trade for feed. Then his eyes landed on Mara. "Say," he muttered, scratching his beard. "She yours?" Colt didn't blink. "She's mine. Just a skin. Don't look like no local. Had a poster last week up at Shelby's. Said a girl went missing near the Miller's place. Might be a—" "She's mine, Jessup," Colt said again, voice low. Jessup looked at Mara again. She'd gone pale, backed into the stall like a trapped colt. He tipped his hat with a nervous chuckle. Sure, Colt. Just making talk." As the wagon rattled off, Colt turned to Mara. "You stay away from the main road for now. Don't let folks see your face if you can help it." She nodded. No argument. Just swallowed and kept brushing the mare, slower now. That night, long after the lamps were turned down and the crickets had taken over the air, Colt knelt by the fireplace. The floorboards under the hearthstone were loose, always had been. With careful hands, he pried them up and pulled out a rusted tin box. Inside was a star-shaped badge dulled by time, a folded piece of parchment, and a double-barrel shotgun wrapped in old oilcloth. He ran his fingers over the metal. The badge still bore the engraving, Territorial Lawman, 7th District. He unfolded the paper. The handwriting was young, rushed. His son's last letter before the raid. Just a few words. Asterisk Pa, I shot my first coyote today. Ma said I'm too proud. Maybe. But I think you'd been proud, too. Come home soon, asterisk. Colt read again. And again. Then he put the badge on the mantel, loaded the shotgun, and set it beside the door. In the dark, the fire still crackled, sending orange light dancing across the log walls. Mara stood by the edge of the stairs, silent. You knew them, didn't you? She said softly. The men who took your family. Colt didn't look up. I knew him, he said. Let their leader walk once. Thought mercy was a better weapon. A long pause stretched between them. You won't let them take another, she whispered. Colt finally looked at her. The flames reflected in her eyes, bright and fierce. No, he said. Not this time. Smoke brought the news first. A column of black rising above the canyon edge, twisting skyward like a signal from hell. Then came the riders, 2 ranch hands galloping into Perdition Creek just before dusk, faces streaked with ash and fear. The McAllister place had been burned clean to the ground. House, barn, fences gone. The mother and father were found charred in the doorway, as if they tried to hold the flame back with their own bodies. Of the 2 children, only one was found. The other, a boy no older than 10, was missing. The town went quiet in the wake of it. Shop doors closed early. Whiskey was poured in silence. No one said it, but everyone thought it. The Blackthorns were circling again. Sheriff Grayson rode to the Wheeler Ranch the next morning, his face drawn and pale. He didn't dismount, just leaned on the saddle horn and said, I ain't got the men to go after them, Colt. I asked. Nobody'll ride. Colt didn't answer at first. He just fed the last of the firewood into the stove and nodded once. They'll hit again, Grayson said. You know that, right? Colt glanced toward the barn. Yeah, he said. I know. That night, a scream tore through the ranch like a whip crack. Colt was out of bed before he was fully awake, shotgun in hand. He burst into the tack room loft to find Mara curled in the corner, shaking, eyes wide with terror. She was drenched in sweat, clawing at her own arms like something was crawling beneath the skin. He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. Mara, he said, it's me. You're safe. Her breathing slowed, but her eyes didn't leave the corner of the room. She was still somewhere else. They had dogs, she whispered. I thought they'd catch me. I thought. Colt didn't speak. He waited. They took me from the trading post, she said finally. 3 months back. Maybe 4. They were dressed like drifters, just one wagon. I climbed in, stupid, looking for something to eat. They hit me in the head. Her voice grew flat, mechanical. When I woke up, I was tied. One of them kept saying I'd fetch a good price. Another said I wasn't worth hauling. They argued about it for days. She looked down at her hands, flexed them like she still felt the ropes. They stopped for water near Devil's Hollow. I slipped my bindings when they were drunk. Ran barefoot. 2 days. Didn't sleep. Didn't stop. Colt closed his eyes. All this time, he'd thought she was just another stray, another forgotten soul limping through the aftermath. But she'd been in the belly of the Blackthorn camp. She'd seen it, smelled it, escaped it. You're not just a runaway, he said softly. You're the only one that ever made it out. She looked up at him, something hard shining behind the fear. They thought I was too small to matter. They were wrong. By morning, the ranch had changed. The quiet had become something else, readiness, a purpose. Colt laid out old maps on the kitchen table. Mara pointed to the bend in the river near Devil's Hollow. They camped somewhere in here. There was red clay and a dead tree that looked like a gallows. Colt nodded. That narrows it. Over the next 2 days, they prepared in silence. Colt checked his gear, oiled the shotgun, counted shells, packed jerky and water in his saddlebags. Mara helped, wordless but present. She moved with a kind of grim efficiency, never asking what came next. On the 3rd morning, Colt rode out alone, heading west toward the canyon stage stop. The place hadn't changed much, still smelled of tobacco and horses, still had that crooked weather vane that pointed east no matter the wind. Nita Delgado stepped out onto the porch before he even reached the hitching post. Her silver hair was tied back in a scarf, her long coat dusted from the trail. She had eyes like a hawk and a shotgun that matched. Well, well, she said, lighting a thin cigar. Either the world's ending, or Colt Wheeler finally got tired of pretending to be a farmer. I need help, he said. She blew smoke into the air. I figured. They talked inside, low and fast. He told her about the black thorns, about Mara, about Devil's Hollow. Nita listened without blinking. When he finished, she tapped her cigar on the windowsill and said, "You'll have horses by nightfall. Fresh ones. And safe passage through the box canyon." Colt stood. "I owe you." "You already paid," she said. "Back in Tucson. You remember." He did, but he didn't speak of it. That night, back at the ranch, Mara sat cross-legged on the barn floor with a lump of charcoal and a scrap of burlap. She drew fast, sharp strokes, her brow furrowed in concentration. When she handed the sketch to Colt, he stared for a long time. One eye, a scar down the cheek, crooked teeth, a smile like something born wrong. "Gideon Rusk," she said. "He preached while they be a man to death. Quoted scripture between lashes." Colt took the drawing and held it over the lantern flame. The burlap curled, blackened, turned to ash. "I know him," he said. He didn't say how. The following morning, the sun rose behind clouds, painting the land in soft gray light. Colt stood by the corral, saddling his horse in silence. Mara came from the tack room, wearing a dark duster that hung loose on her frame. She'd strapped a small bandolier across her chest, the little .22 pistol resting snug against her ribs. Her face was calm, determined. Colt watched her buckle the last strap. "You sure you're ready?" She met his eyes without flinching. "I was born ready the night they didn't kill me." The sky turned the color of old bone as Colt Wheeler and Mara rode out before first light. Hooves crunching over brittle ground, dust lifting behind them like ghost trails. The air was dry enough to crack lips and blister tongues. They carried little, just what they could tie to the saddle and wear across their backs. Colt had his shotgun slung low, shells tucked into a hand-sewn bandolier. Mara rode with a small pistol close, a hunting knife strapped to her thigh. They didn't speak much on the trail. Words felt too heavy for the silence of the land. The terrain grew meaner the deeper they went, sharp switchbacks carved into rock, dry riverbeds that twisted through thorn-choked ravines. A dust storm rolled in on the third day, blinding and angry, stinging their eyes and cutting through cloth. They huddled under a rocky outcrop, while the wind howled and sand hissed like snakes. It was during that storm that Colt remembered. Years back, when his badge was still polished and folks greeted him by name, he tracked the Blackthorn riders through this very land. They'd hit a mining town, left 8 dead and 2 women missing. Colt and his posse cornered them in a gulch, thinking it was over. Gideon Rusk had walked out first, calm, smiling, Bible in one hand and a bloodied whip in the other. "We all sinners, Marshal," he'd said, lifting the good book. "But I reckon you and I are the same kind. Just wear different hats." Colt had aimed his rifle straight at the man's heart, and hadn't pulled the trigger. They took Ruskin alive. Let a court sort it out. But somehow, before sentencing came, the bastard slipped his chains and vanished. Colt never forgave himself. Now, the wind howled like it remembered too. By the 5th day, they reached the edge of Devil's Hollow, a canyon so deep the bottom never caught the sun. From the ridge, they spotted the camp tucked between broken boulders and gnarled trees that leaned like dying men. There were 6 wagons, a dozen horses, smoke curling up from a central fire. Men sprawled across bedrolls and stumps, crates of supplies stacked beside them like they weren't planning to move anytime soon. And there, beside the biggest wagon, was the girl, dirty, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a too-big shirt and tied at the ankles. She sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. Colt lifted his spyglass and scanned the camp. "There," he muttered. "That's him." Gideon Rusk stood at the far end, near the horses, talking to a younger man with a rifle slung across his chest. His hair had gone grayer since Colt last saw him, but that face was unmistakable, thin-lipped, with a long scar slicing through his right eye socket like God had tried to erase it. Mara clenched her jaw. "We wait for dark." When the sun dipped behind the rocks and the shadows swallowed the canyon, Colt moved. He crept through the brush like a shadow with breath, boots soft on the red clay. Mara doubled back and climbed the ridge, torch and flint hidden in her coat. At the edge of the clearing, Colt crouched low behind a rusted wheelbarrow. A guard passed close enough to smell, but never looked down. Then came the flicker. Up high on the ridge, flames burst to life, tall, wild, and dancing. The camp scrambled at once, men shouting, guns drawn, horses rearing. Panic spread like wildfire. Colt moved fast. 2 guards by the girl. One turned to the ridge, the other stayed. Colt rose and slammed the butt of his shotgun into the closer one's skull. The second turned and caught a barrel to the chest before he could cry out. Mara was already halfway down the slope by then. Torch tossed aside, knife in hand. "Get her," Colt said, voice tight. The girl whimpered as Mara cut her loose. Her knees buckled. Mara hoisted her up, half carrying, half dragging her toward the gully. Then came the gunfire. A bullet split the air and slammed into Colt's thigh. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched hard enough to crack bone. More gunshots. Colt fired back, 1 blast, 2. Bodies fell. Men screamed. Mara shoved the girl into a saddlebag basket on one of the waiting horses and turned back for Colt. He waved her off. "Ride," he barked. "Go." But she didn't. She fired twice behind him, driving back a charging outlaw, then grabbed his arm. Together, limping and half-crawling, they reached the ridge path, where the horse snorted, wild-eyed. Colt's world had narrowed to sound, hoofbeats, gunshots, and a voice calling his name. Then he saw him. Rusk stood in a gash of moonlight down in the gulch, alone, revolver loose at his side. "Wheeler," he shouted, arms wide like a preacher at a tent revival. "Come to collect your penance." Colt pushed off Mara, wobbled to his feet. "Stay here," he growled. He slid down the gravel into the ravine, pain flaring with every step. Russ didn't move. "You never had it in you," Russ called, voice echoing. "All those years ago. You couldn't kill me then. Can you now?" Colt leveled the shotgun. "I could," he said, "but it'd be too quick." Rusk laughed. "You think you're justice. You're just another broken man hiding behind ghosts." "You preach like you believe it," Colt muttered. "Shame you never read the part where judgment comes like a thief." Rusk raised his pistol. Colt fired. The blast shattered the canyon silence. Rusk dropped like a puppet with cut strings, mouth open, blood painting the stone behind him. Colt stood there a moment longer, breathing hard. The echo of the shot faded into the night. Mara appeared beside him. The girl slumped over the saddle up above. She reached out, helped him climb. They rode hard, the canyon mist rising behind them like smoke. Colt's leg bled into his boot, but he stayed upright. Mara led the way, face set fierce. The girl leaned against her, asleep in her arms, safe now, for the first time in days. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The night held them like a secret, and the Devil's Hollow faded into silence behind them. The dust hadn't even settled on their coats when they rode back into Perdition Creek. The town was quiet, cautious, as if unsure whether to treat them like survivors or ghosts. Colt sat upright in the saddle, his injured leg wrapped tight and stiff. Blood dried at the edges. The rescued girl clung to Mara's waist as they rode side by side, both covered in the soot and sweat of the journey. People stepped out of doorways as they passed. The blacksmith, the barber, even the preacher, silent under the church eave. No one cheered, but no one turned away either. Sheriff Grayson met them at the livery. He took one look at Colt's leg and gave a slow, stunned shake of his head. Then he stepped forward and extended a hand. "You did what none of us had the guts to try," he said. Colt nodded, but said nothing. His eyes scanned the street. Everyone was looking, not at him, but at the girl riding beside him. At Mara. She didn't flinch from their gaze. Nita Delgado arrived not long after, riding in from the canyon trail like she'd known when to appear. She took the rescued girl gently in her arms, wrapped her in a thick shawl, and whispered something soft against her hair. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes closed as she leaned into Nita's chest. "She'll stay with me," Nita said. "Far as I'm concerned, she's got a home." Colt nodded once. That was enough. In the days that followed, something shifted in Perdition Creek. Quietly, slowly, without proclamation. A fresh pie showed up at Colt's gate one morning, still warm, covered with a checkered cloth. The next day, a sack of flour and a half-pound of beans. By week's end, there was a line of offerings, bread, preserves, a spool of yarn, a hand-sewn dress folded with care. No names attached, no words spoken, just silent tribute, not to Colt, but to what had been done. Mara noticed it, but didn't say anything. Instead, she started joining the others, helping Nita with repairs to the schoolhouse, hauling lumber for a new roof, running messages between neighbors on horseback. The town accepted her with the same quiet grace it had judged her by, stern, but willing to change its mind. She didn't sleep in the barn anymore. Colt moved her bedroll into the spare room in the house and bought her a rail blanket from the general store. He didn't comment when she took her meals beside him at the table, boots off, hair clean, hands folded in silent thanks before she ate. She still didn't speak much, but she laughed now. Not often, not loudly, but she laughed. One afternoon, Colt sat on the porch with a cup of coffee cooling in his hands, his bad leg stretched out in the sun. Across the yard, Mara played with the neighbor kids, their shrieks ringing through the air as they tossed a ball made of stitched leather and twine. She looked different now. Still thin, still wary in moments, but upright. Shoulders back, eyes forward. Colt watched her for a long time. Then he pulled a yellowed envelope from his coat pocket, the one he'd carried since before the ride, unread all these years. He opened it. Pa, I shot my first coyote today. Ma said I'm too proud. Maybe. But I think you'd been proud, too. Come home soon, Eli. He read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it on the porch rail, the wind brushing against the edge like a nod from someplace else. The sun dropped lower. The children scattered home one by one, and Mara crossed the yard toward him. She looked older in that golden light, not just in years, but in presence. You all right? She asked. Yeah, Colt said. Just thinking. She sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long while. Then a shadow rode into the yard. A man in a worn brown duster, beard like wire, a U.S. Marshal's star hanging from his belt, and a bounty poster in hand. He dismounted slow, eyes scanning the porch. I'm looking for a girl named Mara, he said. Reports say she escaped from a Blackthorn camp. There's questions need answering. She's wanted in 3 territories. Not for crimes, just for testimony. They want to know what she saw. Colt set his cup down, stood with effort, hands at his sides, but close to the holster. No one by that name here, he said. The marshal tilted his head. Sure. Would have been a girl in rags, maybe scared, thin, wounded. Could be 100 girls like that, Colt said. None here. Then the door behind him creaked open. Mara stepped out slowly, not hiding. Her hair was tied back. She wore clean clothes, boots laced tight, a small shotgun cradled in her arms. Not threatening, just present. She was here, she said, but I'm not her anymore. The marshal looked at her for a long moment, then at Colt, then back again. Understood, he said finally. You folks take care. He rode off without another word. Mara stood there on the porch as the dust settled. She didn't watch him leave. Just turned, walked back inside, and placed the shotgun back on its mount. Colt followed her gaze to the kitchen table, set with 2 plates, a loaf of bread, a jar of blackberry jam, and a stew pot still steaming. He smiled. Not wide, just enough. And somewhere far off, a voice like wind and legend whispered what the old folks still tell in the canyons. Asterisk. And so the legend goes, the girl who once chewed straw found a seat at the rancher's table, and beside her sat Justice, warm as bread and twice as strong. Asterisk.